inside the world of box lacrosse. We had a moment there where I was thinking, wait, who's bringing us back in? I kind of pointed at you, Adam, but I think I was a bit late doing it and maybe not on camera. He is Adam Levy with Greg Beecher from Blue Squatch Productions, and I am Steven Stamp. And we are going to talk about we were just talking a bunch about Americans. Here is part of the American infusion, a couple of young face-off guys. We are going to have the Stathaki Naso debate. And I am going to open by saying I am Team Stathaki. They're both great. They've both come in and done such a good job for their teams. I am going to go Stathaki, but he was terrific, I thought. But here he is at the dot. And to me, one of the things that I saw was he wins a ton of faceoffs, obviously. And I was watching how many shifts he plays. And, a young guy, especially a faceoff specialist, is not going to play a ton of defensive shifts, especially when he's fairly new to it. Because anytime, you got a penalty kill, he's not out there. Anytime that you're coming out of a break, you send your top defensive unit out. And then, if there's any kind of stoppage or things, and the guys arrested, you're sending your top guys out. For Vancouver, that means, Owen Grant and Reed Bowering and Brett Midsky and Ryan Dilks. I almost said Jamie Dilks. Ryan Dilks. I mean, so many Matt Peters. There's so many, right? Braden Lady. They have such a solid, deep group that he's not coming out a lot, but he is. Whenever there are a series of possessions in a row, he's coming out for a regular defensive shift. He looks completely comfortable. One of the things that really stood out to me is how he is communicating. You see when they're setting up in their D and the opposing players are coming in, he's pointing and talking to guys. You can see, and it looks to me like he's asking questions on the floor. Like, do I take him? I've got this guy. You got him? And they're like, and the veterans are giving him leadership, but he is clearly looking very comfortable. He's not a liability defensively. Again, he's not going to be out there in the last minute when you pick your guys go out, but I don't think they mind having him on the floor at all.
No, I don't think so at all. I think he hit it right, the nail on the head there. And I think that this was part of the Malosky and even, when the veterans were on that Vancouver squad where we, knew that Beers and Mitski and Dilks and those guys would be so influential to those younger guys, especially defensively. And, Malosky's going to push his guys to want to be more fearless and want to play more defense. And so you see that even in the efforts by Stathaki and in blocking a couple shots, the turnovers, I would imagine, at least on the numbers, and I know we've had debates on the numbers, I imagine, he's getting hounded probably after he picks up a loose ball and then gives up possession. And that's something that, will happen over time. The guys know how to flip the ball back to the guys on the wing or the defensive guys. But it's a very interesting battle. And when it comes to Jake Naso of the Saskatchewan Rush, I have to say I've been incredibly impressed with him. And it's great to see his development as a player. And he's had some really tough challenges, just as Stathakis has had this season. But, I remember early in the season, he basically went even with Jake Withers. I think he actually had a winning,
more win, didn't he?
Yeah. Which, I mean, to do against Jake Withers, who, not having the best season at the dot, but
partly because he had to face Jake Naso and right. Naso had such a great game, right? I mean,
yeah. But yeah, he's been great. Unfortunately, in this last game in week 9, he did go out with an injury and did not come back after the first quarter. Mike Messenger ended up taking the draws in that one. However, I have heard that it doesn't seem like it's a terrible injury, and I don't expect him to miss much time, if any time at all. So keep your eyes on that in week 10 if Naso is back. But the other thing when I was looking it up, because Naso was having such a strong start to his season, the Rush in their entire history, going back to the Edmonton days, haven't had a guy, even during the Jeremy Thompson days, that has won at this level at the dot. And so, this is kind of showing, do faceoffs really matter? Well, 5-2, you can equate some of that to possessions. I know you can give it to me a little bit, but I think, as Evan Schemenauer broke it down, once you pass that 60% mark, you are winning at a much higher clip. And clearly the Rush are doing that so far this season.
Yeah. So for one thing, I mean, Jeremy Thompson was a guy who's a good D transition player, solid guy, and took faceoffs, and he's won a lot, but he's never been a guy who won a ton of faceoffs. He's more of a timing guy too. He'll try and time the whistle. If you watch games where he's playing, he'll have 2 or 3 violations a game where he just jumps early. Because that's his thing. He's trying to time it, and it's worthwhile. It works for me. Like, you give up those 2 or 3, in exchange for having it, because he's not going to be like Jake Withers, where Jake Withers is just a beast getting after the ball. Like if he doesn't win the clamp, which he does a lot, he will go and just battle for it and be part of getting the ball afterwards. I think Naso has been really good. I mean, he had that goal a little while ago. The one thing I did notice with Naso, even before he went out in the game, as the camera's coming across during the broadcast, and he's like standing behind the backup goalie. He's not in there in the defensive mix. It didn't seem so much. I don't think he's playing a lot of shifts, and obviously we hope that he's back quickly. I think one of the things that when it comes to the faceoffs, they become more important as more teams have faceoff guys, right? Really good faceoff guys, because all of a sudden it is. I mean, it used to be that, you know, if you're facing Jake Withers, you're like, we're going to lose all the faceoffs. We'll just play D. I remember talking to guys who played against Jeff Snyder, and they said after a while, when the whistle went, they just let him take the clamp. And as the whistle went, they just lift their stick up and start slashing his stick, because you weren't going to beat him on the clamp. So you might as well just try to get the ball free. So, but as you have all these guys coming in with Naso and Stathaki, and obviously Trevor Baptiste is a great faceoff guy. Justin Naso in Calgary is really good, and he's a very good player. He could probably play in the league if he didn't take faceoffs, but for sure with what he brings there, he's a value add. So when you have all these guys, all of a sudden you're not losing 60% of the faceoffs. Maybe you're losing 70 or 75 if you don't have it, and then that becomes an issue, right? Yep. I mean, you don't want. That's where it does wear on your players. And
that's why, sorry to interrupt, but that's, why, the Rochester Nighthawks, they went out and got Mike Sisselberger, because, they admitted, like, when you're losing 20 and 25 faceoffs, and I think we spoke about this a few weeks ago, that's when it really does start to pile up, and they were getting the losses because of that. Obviously, Sisselberger has been, I believe it's the holdout list, the short-term holdout list that he's on.
Yeah, he went to the PLL sixes thing, and they were doing a camp. He was doing like a clinic or something.
Yeah, and so
you love that. I don't think we do, but
I mean, he's very deeply committed to the PLL, and I'm actually happy that he's getting some reps in the box. I'm sure he's heard from guys like Baptiste and other Americans that learning how to do it in the box game is very helpful for the field. So I'm sure that's playing a part in it.
Yeah. Guys like Sisselberger, we've seen him. He seems like one of the guys who is quite comfortable getting the ball and going to the net and making decisions. Like one of the things, some of the guys, especially the American faceoff guys, who get the ball and then they see a lane, it's the tunnel vision can happen pretty easily, right? It's like, I have a shot at the net, I'm going in, I'm shooting. And you can see sometimes they're like, this is what's happening. Whereas Sisselberger, it looked to me like he made that one beautiful pass where he went and got the loose ball off the face-off over by the boards, ran along the boards, and drifted a little lob pass over to somebody who scored. It was gorgeous. I mean, it was really, really nice. And that is really developing a comfort level. And we've got, Joe Nardella is the other guy we haven't even mentioned, and he's one of the best face-off guys. And for fairly quickly, Albany realized, hey, he can play on defense. He'll be out there. He kills penalties. He does everything. He's out there whenever they need him. He's just part of the defensive rotation, an important part. So he may be the best of the bunch of the American faceoff guys right now in terms of all-around game.
Yeah, and we've mentioned a handful of young face-off names, but this really does feel like the next very exciting wave of face-off guys in the National Lacrosse League. We had Baptiste, Erlin, Ardella, Withers at one point, and now we've got Naso and Stathaki and Naso and Sisselberger, and it seems very exciting. And for three of those four guys to be Americans is very exciting. But I'm glad you had mentioned Naso, because as you as a Canadian and me as a pseudo-Canadian living in America now, I feel like, we got to give our Canadian face-off guys some love.
For sure. Honorary Canadian, Adam.
Yes.
And did we haven't mentioned Tim Edwards, who is also, terrific American face-off guy. And now, so the thing about it is, you have a face-off guy, he may or may not be able to play a lot of defensive shifts at the time. It becomes very much a roster composition issue. You have 21 players on your active roster. You dress 19 for the game. 2 have to be goalies. You have 17 spots. Most teams go with 7 forwards. You've got 10 defenders. That's 2 full lines of 5. if you have one of those defenders that can't go out for a regular shift, it's putting a load on other players. And like I said, after a stoppage, anytime there's the commercial timeouts or media timeouts, anytime there's a quarter, you're putting your top guys out, and you can manage that load to an extent, but it is challenging to have a guy who you don't feel comfortable putting out on defense, especially for some teams that like to occasionally dress 8 forwards, 4 and 4 instead of 4 and 3. Then you've got 9 defenders, and that can get tricky and then if you don't want to be going with 8 defenders, because it is exhausting to play defense in the NLL. That's why, and in lacrosse, that's why you have more defenders than forwards.
So Buffalo is who I think of when you talk about that. But I mean, is there other teams that maybe I'm missing that? Because Farrell basically I haven't seen a single shift that he's taken other than a faceoff.
No, and Farrell, I asked John Tavares that last year in the pregame call before the one of the playoff games, and he said, I said, can you afford, especially, I said, when you have the back-to-back, because they were playing in the final with Albany, the 2 games, back-to-back nights. I said, can you afford to have someone who doesn't really play shifts when you can only have so many runners and you need fresh legs? And he said, for him, it took the load off of Nick Weiss or someone to take faceoffs. And Saskatchewan's a great example with Mike Messenger, where he was taking faceoffs. He's still effective, but I think it impacts almost everybody in their ability to play a complete game. For some reason, it doesn't seem to bother Jake Withers at all. He's an Iron Man. He is unbelievable. But everybody else, I mean, Joe Nardella is kind of in that class too, but I think he takes a shift here and there to get some break. But that is one to me that is a really tricky decision.
But I think it's a great question, and I also think it brings up this kind of future discussion with the Buffalo Bandits, because they do have some veteran guys on that defensive side of the ball. Particularly, you mentioned Weiss, but obviously with Steve Priolo and Paul Dawson. As they start to rebuild that defense, are they going to change things up where they're going to need a guy, whether it's Farrell or somebody else, who can step back and play those defensive shifts? It'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah. Do they look at a guy like, spoiler alert, Bo Columbus, who's one of my prospects to watch? I don't think he's a top 10 guy, but he might be. And he's a good, solid player, plays for Coburg, Kodiaks, and MSL. He was a very, very good junior player. And I know teams have their eye on him because he is a guy who should win a lot of faceoffs and can play. So, do they look for someone like that? And I think, given that Stathaki kind of came out of nowhere, Naso came out of nowhere for us watching primarily box stuff, I think there are probably some guys that are going to be the next Stathaki/Naso, right? So who are they going to be? Who knows? They're going to come out of nowhere. For us, I'm sure teams have their eyes on them and are paying attention.
Exactly.
Do you know any? Do you know any off the top of your head?
I do not know any off the top of my head.
All right. Me neither. Are we done? We're done for that section. We still have more show to come, so don't go away. We will be back on Inside the World of Box Lacrosse for Adam Levy and Greg Beecher on Blue Squatch and Inside Lacrosse. I'm Steven Stamp, and we will be back in, I'd say, a minute and a half. Everyone grab a drink and be ready to roll.